the cataclysm descended upon the world suddenly, bringing a destruction that no one could have foreseen. Death took on monstrous forms, emerging with an insatiable hunger to devour everything in its path. The survivor knew this could be his last moment, but the instinct to live spoke louder than the paralyzing terror. Cornered among the ruins of a fallen civilization, he realized there was nowhere to run. The only way out was to face the creature. In an act of pure desperation, the man launched his attack directly into the predator's gaping maw, risking everything in a single blow. However, the audacity came at an immediate price. Piercing pain shot through his arm as the beast's fangs closed mercilessly. The brutal impact threw him back, forcing him to create distance from that abomination before it was too late to react. Despite his injuries, the young man quickly recovered. There was no time to feel pain when death was still lurking. Exhaustion weighed on his shoulders, and the reality of this endless fight began to erode his sanity little by little. This confrontation, however, was insignificant compared to the true horror. The entire world had become a slaughterhouse filled with titans and nightmares. Witnesses to that carnage froze, unable to process the scale of the devastation unfolding before them. The survivor with the backpack, however, carried a different weight. He muttered an apology, aware of his own powerlessness. While the others continued their path over the pile of corpses, he remained behind, isolated in his guilt and the desolate scenery. Resignation took over his face. He knew that excuses would not change the cruel fate that had been sealed for them all. With anger bubbling beneath the surface and nothing left to lose, he cursed everything and everyone who caused this hell. Humanity suddenly found itself insignificant before the colossi that emerged to eradicate civilization. However, amidst the chaos, some awakened transcendental powers to defy the impossible. The man with the backpack, driven by the instinct to survive, crawled over the wreckage of monsters and humans. He finally held the core in his hands, feeling the energy that could change his destiny. However, guilt and denial consumed him. The survivor refused to accept his own weakness. He shouted against the wind, trying to convince himself that he was not just a cowardly opportunist. But the panic soon gave way to a disturbing silence. The man realized that there were no more sounds of battle. Looking around, reality hit him. He was alone in a newly created cemetery. His companions, who fought bravely, now lay lifeless on the scorched earth. The survivor muttered that he was safe, but the irony of that safety soon turned into dread. A deep voice echoed in his mind, announcing that he was the only one left. The real threat emerged. The entity revealed its identity and class. Asmodeus, the demon, stood before him. There was no time for reactions or pleas. The fatal blow was struck in the blink of an eye. Pain exploded as the invisible blade tore through his flesh, silencing his cries of despair. Under the bloody moonlight, the demon watched the last human fall. The massacre was complete. The man realized the danger too late. Terror gripped him as he noticed the imminent threat approaching from behind. The attack was devastating and inevitable. Destruction fell upon the traveler without mercy, piercing the ground and everything around. Pain hit him before he could even react. The survivor felt life draining away as he looked up, stunned. His mind refused to accept reality. The shock of the fatal wound brought only denial and disbelief in the face of what had happened. The certainty of the end brought a bitter question. The man wondered if this would be his final destiny, dying so pathetically. Tears of frustration mixed with the blood on his face. The fear of death and regret completely paralyzed him. His consciousness began to fail rapidly. All that remained there was the viscous trail of a life being cut short. Painful memories flooded his last moments. He recalled the tragedy that took his parents and the years of humiliation and abuse he suffered at school. Anger replaced fear. The dying man cursed his entire existence. Furious that he had lived as an impotent being, despised by everyone until the end. Suddenly, an overwhelming energy exploded within his mind. The miraculous event he never expected finally happened. The universe seemed to answer his final plea. The hidden and impossible requirements for his evolution had been met in that instant of death. The exhausted body yielded under the pressure of the newly acquired power. fate played a cruel trick, granting strength at the moment of his downfall. Confusion momentarily overcame the physical pain. The survivor, stunned, did not comprehend the nature of what he was witnessing. A luminous and ethereal entity materialized before him. It seemed like salvation itself, descending to intervene in his tragic fate. However, the true magnitude of the event was revealed. The man understood with absolute certainty that he was in the presence of a primordial and terrifying force. The calamity suddenly interrupted its advance, freezing the massacre that seemed inevitable. The demonic creature's attention was diverted from its prey, drawn to a greater force that had just arrived. The survivor, still trembling, looked up to witness the luminous figure descending before him like a miracle. The man tried to process the identity of that being, his mind wavering between fear and recognition. The divine figure merely smiled, displaying an enigmatic and disturbing satisfaction in the face of the scene of death. She announced her irrevocable decision. She would grant the mortal a power capable of rewriting his destiny at that instant. The survivor heard the promise, but the magnitude of those words seemed to escape his wounded and exhausted comprehension. The reality of the situation hit the man violently. This was not a final delirium, but something far more complex. The goddess revealed the reason for her intervention. The unbreakable determination of that human had deeply impressed her. In a panic, the man reached out, desperately trying to interrupt the process, to demand explanations. However, the entity ignored the appeal. She just laughed, amused by the confusion and fear of her chosen one. Terror paralyzed the survivor as he realized he had no choice. He was just a pawn in this divine game. The space around him violently distorted, manifesting an abyssal monstrosity that roared into existence. As chaos ensued, the divinity remained motionless, observing the unfolding events with absolute coldness. A confused voice echoed in the darkness, questioning the insanity of that ritual that defied all logic. The aggressor felt ignored and decided that words were no longer enough. He announced that he needed to wake the boy up by force. The threat materialized instantly when a brutal kick hit the passive target. The impact was violent, throwing the young man's face to the side with excessive force. Without caring about the other's pain, the bully continued his speech, demanding absolute attention as the victim fell. The group surrounded Taehyun, mocking his silence and pressing for an answer that was not coming. The boy seemed stunned and helpless, unable to react as hostile hands approached again. However, in that instant of submission, something awakened within his gaze. A familiar interface appeared in the air, confirming Kim Taehyun's identity and pathetic status at that moment. Instead of fear, an unexpected reaction took over him. The young man lowered his head, hiding a sinister smile. A maniacal laugh escaped his lips as he firmly grabbed his tormentor's collar. The gang recoiled, confused and disturbed by the victim's sudden change in behavior. The leader, however, felt only fury at that sudden audacity and prepared to retaliate. But the target was no longer the same. Taehyun moved with impossible speed, counter-attacking before they could blink. The blow was devastating, throwing the aggressor away and leaving his companions in total panic. Kim Taehyun remained there, savoring the reversal of the situation with a predatory satisfaction. Taehyun felt a wave of raw emotion wash over him. It wasn't just the power flowing through his veins, but the liberation from years of torment, manifesting in a smile that bordered on insanity. The momentary silence dominated the rooftop. The power dynamic had shifted drastically. Where before there was a surrounded victim, now there was a predator watching his hesitant prey. With a casual gesture, he wiped his face, showing total indifference to the threat before him. That simple movement of composure only served to enrage his former oppressors even more. Unable to accept the new reality, the henchmen advanced screaming. They unleashed their magical abilities in a joint attack, confident that brute force and numerical superiority would be enough to crush him. However, for Taehyun, time seemed to have slowed down. He slipped between the aggressors with a disturbing ease, reading their movements long before they were executed. The response was immediate and devastating. Seizing the opening, he unleashed a brutal uppercut, connecting with surgical precision and halting the enemy's attack in an instant. Without missing a beat, he spun to deal with the second opponent. A powerful kick to the stomach sent the aggressor flying, proving that his physical strength now surpassed any magic they possessed. As he fought, something awakened within his mind. An ancient and experienced consciousness emerged, bringing with it the maturity and weight of 35 years of a hardened life. The system wasn't just strengthening his muscles, it was rewriting his very essence. He felt his body being reshaped, reaching the peak of human potential to become a perfect war receptacle. Immediately, a vast compendium of information was unlocked in his brain. All the accumulated knowledge about the abyss, the weaknesses of the monsters, and the rules of that chaotic world became his. Along with theory came practice. Centuries of mastery in boxing, fencing, and archery were assimilated instantly, transforming his amateur reflexes into the muscle memory of a master combatant. Armed with this newfound proficiency, Taehyun advanced. The blind fury of his enemies became pathetic before his refined technique. He now saw the world through the eyes of a veteran. The combat transformed into a one-sided massacre. He manipulated the flow of battle with ease, deflecting and counter-attacking, as if he were merely punishing unruly children. Gravity finally claimed the aggressors. Violently hurled against the concrete, they realized too late that the hierarchy of that terrace had been irrevocably shattered. Taehyun observed the result of his work. A smile of pure satisfaction curved his lips. There was no more fear, only the dark pleasure of someone finally in control. Taehyun exhaled, relaxing his shoulders. He displayed a quiet arrogance, as if the combat had already been decided before it even began. His eyes locked onto his opponent with a predatory intensity. The game was over. Now only cold, calculated execution remained. The gang leader recoiled, stunned by the sudden shift. He questioned incredulously whether that display of confidence meant his victim had awakened real powers. Refusing to accept reality, the aggressor invoked his ultimate ability. An impenetrable armor enveloped his body as he screamed, determined to crush any resistance. A massive fist was launched with devastating force. The attack aimed to obliterate the youth in a single move, betting everything on brute strength. However, Taehyun moved with an unnatural fluidity. He slipped to the side, causing the lethal blow to strike only empty air. The protagonist continued to dodge, maintaining absolute calm. Each furious lunge from the enemy passed within inches of him, never finding its target. The attacker felt a chill down his spine. He realized too late that his clumsy offense had left him exposed and vulnerable. Seizing the opponent's imbalance, Taehyun advanced. He closed the distance in an instant, ready to punish the lapse in defense. The resulting clash generated a violent explosion. The impact kicked up debris and dust, momentarily obscuring the two combatants. The bully tried to reorient himself amidst the confusion. He searched desperately for the enemy, feeling fear begin to replace the rage. Suddenly, Taehyun emerged through the smoke like a ghost. The youth attacked with relentless speed, targeting a vital point before the defense could recover. His fist descended, seeking the end of the confrontation. The trajectory was perfect, calculated to bypass the external protection and cause real damage. Taehyun applied all his strength to the blow, confident in imminent victory. He expected to see the enemy collapse before his newfound power. However, the advance was suddenly interrupted. Shock swept through the environment as the attack was blocked, defying the logic of that one-sided massacre. Kim Taehyun charged violently, ignoring his own physical limits to try and break through the opponent's defense. The impact shook the ground, but the gang leader withstood the collision. Brute force met an unyielding barrier. The excessive effort took its toll immediately. The youth coughed up blood, feeling his body protest against the strain of the previous blow. The adversary approached with a sneer, questioning whether that suicidal attack had been worth it. To him, the fight was already decided. The bully displayed the confidence of someone who considered himself untouchable. He looked at the fallen boy as if he were an insignificant insect. The rocky armor adjusted with a heavy sound. The aggressor prepared to finish the job, certain of his victory. Taehyun remained motionless amidst the debris. As he stared upwards, his mind wandered to the cruel rules that governed this new reality. He understood the injustice of the system. Blood trickled down, but the cold determination in his gaze remained intact. In this world, the hierarchy was absolute. The difference between a rank F and the higher levels was an insurmountable abyss of physical and magical power, and he was at the bottom of that abyss, rank F. However, the system had granted him a tool, capable of breaking that logic: predation. Suddenly, the gang leader hesitated. An icy sensation ran down his spine, warning him that something was wrong. A sinister energy began to emanate from the protagonist's body. The hidden power finally answered his call. Kim Tae-hyun stood up, enveloped in a threatening aura. He declared with conviction that defeat was not a possibility. The pressure in the air became suffocating. What had once seemed like easy prey now revealed itself to be a deadly threat ready to devour everything. Shock paralyzed the bully. He couldn't comprehend how someone he had always despised could emanate such terrifying power. The blood flowed, but Taehyun ignored the physical pain. He decided he wouldn't hold back anymore. The humanity in his gaze vanished. All that remained was the predatory instinct of one who had embraced violence. The gang leader tried to retaliate with brute force, relying on his transformation to crush the boy. However, a voracious energy manifested, ready to devour anything in its path. The bully realized too late that his impenetrable defense couldn't withstand that supernatural pressure. Taehyun advanced relentlessly, delivering blows that carried years of pent-up rage. He gave no room to breathe. The attack was continuous, forcing the enemy to the limit. The intensity of the impact was such that the very air around them seemed to scream. With a final movement, he reached the opponent's barrier and forced it to yield. The protection completely unraveled, leaving the enemy vulnerable to final judgment. Meanwhile, oblivious to the carnage, the other students laughed and talked, enjoying the false peace. The tranquility was brutally shattered when the battle broke through the walls of their reality. Debris flew in all directions, turning the classroom into a zone of immediate danger. The dust of destruction covered the environment, silencing the laughter instantly. The effort took its toll. Taehyun panted heavily, struggling to maintain consciousness after the burst of power. The dust settled on the rubble. Taehyun remained standing, observing the result of the destruction he had just caused. The cost of that power soon took its toll. Exhaustion hit him like a wave, making it difficult to even breathe. His body reacted to the energy overload. His skin began to crystallize, a painful side effect of the mana he forced through himself. The brute force finally dissipated. The environment returned to normal, leaving only the physical consequences of the impact. It was necessary to seek help immediately. The school's infirmary was the only refuge available to treat the injuries. The nurse noticed the unexpected arrival. The tension in the air indicated that this would not be a routine visit. His classmates carried him inside in a hurry. The young man was too incapacitated to walk alone after the brutal confrontation. Taehyun struggled to stay conscious. The blood and pain made it difficult to focus on what was happening around him. The woman screamed, alarmed by the student's critical condition. This went far beyond any common school accident. After the emergency treatment, silence returned. He rested on the stretcher, recovering his strength as his body stabilized. The nurse used healing magic to close the wounds. The process accelerated the recovery that would be impossible by natural means. When questioned about the origin of the injuries, he decided to lie. He invented an awkward fall to hide the supernatural battle. The excuse was accepted, allowing him to leave. Taehyun left the building, keeping his secrets guarded for now. However, he knew that the explanation was fragile. Attributing such damage to a simple accident was almost an insult to others' intelligence. The truth was much more dangerous. The blow he delivered contained a destructive power, comparable to that of a rank C hunter. Taehyun climbed the steps slowly, his mind full of doubts about the circumstances of his return. He paused for a moment, feeling the weight of reality fall on his shoulders before continuing. In front of the familiar building, he reaffirmed his urgent need to understand what was happening to his life. A bittersweet feeling washed over him. Despite all the trials, he had managed to return home. The image of his family, united and happy, appeared in his mind, a precious memory of those he wanted to protect. Carefully, he turned the doorknob. The door gave way, allowing him to enter the residence. He entered determined to resume his routine and seek information, without imagining what awaited him inside. Suddenly, he stopped. The atmosphere was heavy, and his instincts warned him that something was terribly wrong. The scene before him was a nightmare. Intruders dominated the room, surrounding and humiliating someone he knew very well. The frightened face of the boy on the floor overlapped with the smiling memory that Taehyun kept. The innocence had been broken. The shock hit him physically. He recoiled, trying to process the violence that had invaded his sanctuary. Confusion quickly gave way to sharp tension. He immediately understood the gravity of the threat. The cause of the conflict was scattered on the floor, showing that a debt or greed had motivated that brutality. The invaders finally noticed his presence. Confused and angry, they questioned who dared interrupt their collection. While the hostage tried to warn him of the danger, the criminals maintained their threatening stance, refusing to release their prey. Taehyun coldly assessed the situation, ignoring the mess, to focus on the real threat. The young man realized that the sanctity of his home had been violated. The protagonist stared down the leader of the invaders in the middle of the destroyed room. The tension in the air was palpable as the two silently sized each other up over the wreckage. To demonstrate dominance, the criminal grabbed the hostage brutally, demanding immediate payment. He made it clear that the violence would continue if he wasn't obeyed. However, Taehyun remained still. The boy watched the cowardly aggression without showing the fear or submission that the invader expected to find. His patience, however, had run out. A slight facial movement indicated that the time for verbal negotiations was definitely over. The gang leader barely had time to process the change in the atmosphere. The instinct for danger screamed in his mind. But it was already too late. An overwhelming force hit him head-on, defying all logic. The aggressor's body was hurled violently through the air as if it weighed nothing. The impact against the floor was brutal, expelling all the air from his lungs. The pain was immediate, turning his arrogance into pure physical suffering. The masked witnesses recoiled in absolute shock. The sudden and inexplicable explosion of violence left the accomplices completely stunned and without reaction. Taehyun slowly approached his fallen prey, casting a menacing shadow. The power hierarchy in the room had completely reversed at that instant. Terror took over the invader as he faced his opponent. He screamed in despair, realizing that he had made a fatal mistake in underestimating the homeowner. Without hesitation, the young man advanced on the fallen man. With frightening ease, Taehyun dominated the aggressor, who, moments before, seemed untouchable. A dark smile curved the protagonist's lips. He wasn't just defending himself, he seemed to relish the opportunity to exert his true strength. Taehyun's expression hardened immediately afterwards, revealing a murderous coldness. The game was over, and the real punishment was about to begin. The gang leader, now completely helpless, stared at his captor with confusion and terror. He couldn't understand the nature of the power that subjugated him. The young man recoiled, his breath failing as the reality of the situation hit him. He realized that there was no turning back. The conflict was inevitable. However, the survival instinct spoke louder. Before he could process the fear, his body reacted to a sudden threat that cut through the air towards him. The response was brutal. With unexpected ferocity, he intercepted the attack, delivering a blow that carried all his accumulated frustration against the aggressor. The force of the impact was overwhelming. He felt the recoil of the shock run through his muscles, the world spinning momentarily as gravity pulled him back. But the enemy was persistent. The gang leader even hit, regained his balance and smiled mockingly, as his reinforcements had already surrounded the place. The coordinated offensive began immediately. One of the subordinates invoked mystical chains, trying to seal the boy's movements and leave him vulnerable. From above, the second attacker gave no respite. He released a concentrated, toxic mist, aiming to undermine the target's strength through rapid and lethal poisoning. The leader himself took advantage of the opening for the final blow. He advanced with a piercing technique, determined to cause deep wounds and end the fight right there. The young man found himself cornered. From the front, from the sides, and from above, the lethal abilities converged simultaneously, eliminating any obvious hope of evasion. Time seemed to slow down. Faced with certain death, his eyes widened, capturing every detail of the impending destruction with terrifying clarity. A deafening explosion swept across the terrace. The impact of the combined abilities generated a shockwave that destroyed everything around, concealing the target under rubble. The dust slowly settled, revealing a scene of devastation. The three attackers kept their guard up, watching the cloud of residual energy cautiously. The leader, however, felt a chill. He ordered his men to retreat, questioning aloud if the victim was really who they thought he was. Doubt corroded his confidence. He watched carefully, trying to understand how someone could have survived that combination of deadly attacks. The answer emerged from the shadows. To the trio's horror, the young man's silhouette remained standing amidst the chaotic energy, unharmed and emanating crushing pressure. The system detected multiple forms of damage trying to invade the boy's body. However, a mysterious resistance nullified the poisoning and bleeding before they could affect him. Taehon's skin reacted instantly to the threat. The organic tissue hardened like rock, creating an impenetrable barrier that absorbed all the impact. The gang leader froze in place. Terror began to arise as he saw that his combined strike was completely useless. The realization of the real danger hit him. He realized, too late, that he had chosen the wrong target to torment. Taehyun counter-attacked with brutality. A wave of energy exploded as he grabbed his opponent and smashed him violently against the ground. The young man felt the power coursing through his veins. A smile crept onto his face as he reveled in the absolute superiority over his former oppressors. The bully screamed, unable to resist the pressure. The overwhelming force confirmed that the power gap between them was abysmal. The dust settled and Taehyun calmly assessed the situation. He concluded that this brief confrontation served to test his new limits. The protagonist observed the defeated, scattered on the ground. However, he felt that the system interface still concealed crucial details about his potential. The detailed information finally appeared in his mind. He confirmed that he possessed an impenetrable defense and a disturbing technique called depredation. Taehyun's aura manifested its true nature. A bestial and dark hunger projected behind him, ready to consume everything in its path. The boy reflected on this unsettling discovery. The idea of devouring his targets awakened a dangerous curiosity within him. A calculating glint appeared in his eyes. He began to understand exactly how he could use that power to survive and ascend. The power dynamic completely reversed in the room. The aggressor, once arrogant, now groveled on the floor in total submission before his victim. The gang leader desperately begged for his life. He cried for mercy, fearing he would be the first prey of this new predator. Taehyun imposed his will on the defeated aggressor. The gang leader, now subdued, trembled on the floor as the protagonist demanded an immediate answer. The reaction, however, was despicable. The bully abandoned all human dignity and began to bark like an animal, hoping that humiliation would guarantee his survival. Meanwhile, a much greater threat awakened over the city. An evil presence distorted the sky, signaling the beginning of an imminent catastrophe that dwarfed any school fight. The sudden change in the atmosphere made everyone's instincts flare. Primal fear took over, alerting even the most oblivious that something terrible had arrived. Taehyun lost interest in the crawling creature at his feet. His attention turned to the horizon, where the true danger was manifesting and demanded total focus. The source of the disturbance came from an isolated industrial zone. The air around the factory was heavy, saturated with an unstable, magical energy under the twilight. Physical barriers had been erected to keep civilians away, but those fences and warnings were useless against the supernatural force that pulsed within. A group of investigative agents entered the ruins of the site. They hoped to find answers, but the destroyed environment, indicated that the situation was much more serious than anticipated. The worst-case scenario was confirmed before them. A mystical barrier struggled to contain a massive horde of monsters that crowded together, thirsty for freedom and blood. The team leader assessed the situation with cold analysis. He immediately understood that this was not a simple security breach, but the beginning of a complete dungeon break. Panic took hold of his subordinates, as they understood the scale of the danger. If those defenses fell, the devastation would not spare the neighboring residential areas. The beasts pressed against the force field relentlessly. The agent remained still before the wall of monsters, calculating his chances as the magical structure trembled. The barrier's resistance finally reached its limit. A demon's face pressed against the energy, distorting the magic that held it captive. With a sound of tearing reality, the defense gave way. The brute force of the creatures broke the seal, allowing death to advance into the real world. Chaos ensued instantly. As the monsters advanced, the agents looked desperately at their leader, awaiting an impossible order in the face of this unforeseen disaster. The agent advanced with lethal speed, determined to eradicate the threat before it spread. His attack was devastating, tearing the creature in half with a single precise movement. He didn't slow down, maintaining the offensive with a cold and calculating efficiency. The monstrosity collapsed, defeated, turning into just another obstacle overcome. Meanwhile, Taehyun ran through the city alleys, questioning whether the situation would really be under control. Upon confirming the location of the incident, the young man felt a brief relief, believing he would arrive in time. Taehyun quickened his pace, ignoring the fatigue. However, at the battle site, the atmosphere changed drastically. The agent, once confident, felt a chill run down his spine as he realized something was wrong. Fear replaced determination in his eyes. His instinct screamed that the real danger was yet to come. The silence that fell over the newly created monster graveyard seemed heavy and unnatural. He analyzed the pile of corpses and noticed a disturbing irregularity in those deaths. The realization hit him like a physical blow. This was not the end of the battle, it was a trap. The sky above them ruptured, releasing a new horde that ignored any existing defenses. The beasts crossed the magical barrier with terrifying ease, thirsty for blood. Cornered and helpless, the survivors could only watch as the true catastrophe fell upon them. The creature announced its arrival with a primal fury. The guttural roar signaled that any chance of truce had vanished completely. The agent was caught off guard by the sudden escalation of violence. Faced with that sight, his mind froze for a crucial instant, unable to process the immediate horror. It wasn't just a lone enemy. An entire legion of demons breached the barriers of reality, flooding the area with an uncontrollable bloodlust. The ground beneath the survivors' feet became a deadly trap. They realized too late that they were surrounded by a catastrophic energy ready to erupt. A gigantic monstrosity fixed its target on the cornered humans. The mere presence of that being emanated a crushing pressure that suffocated any hope of escape. The man felt the weight of imminent death on his shoulders. He tried to react to the overwhelming danger, but fate seemed to have already been sealed. Reality dissolved into a blinding flash. There was no time for pain or regret, only the obliteration of the senses before the impact. A devastating explosion swept the area, consuming everything in its path. The brute force of the attack cleared the scene, leaving no room for resistance. Back in physical reality, the young man gasped for air desperately. His lungs burned and his body trembled, as if he had just emerged from a vivid nightmare. Taehyun ran, not out of blind fear, but out of experience. He moved with the certainty of someone who had already witnessed that disaster and knew exactly the price of hesitation. The boy next to him, however, could barely process the situation. The confusion in his mind prevented him from understanding the calculated urgency that guided Taehyun's steps. The protagonist ignored the physical exhaustion and stayed focused. His mind worked frantically, anticipating the enemy's movements based on memories of a dark future. A human tide surged before them, blocking the escape route. The collective panic turned the crowd into an obstacle as dangerous as the beasts that pursued them. The horde of monsters advanced right behind the civilians, reaping lives without mercy. It was a brutal hunt where the slowest were left behind. While the bullies succumbed to absolute terror, screaming uncontrollably, Taehyun maintained analytical coolness. He knew that panic was the fastest death sentence in that new world. The aggressor screamed with all the strength of his lungs, frustrated by the absolute lack of reaction from his usual victim. However, fear soon replaced the anger in his eyes when he realized that the atmosphere around him had changed drastically. Taehyun simply turned his back on the threat, ignoring the bully's screams as he walked away from that insignificance. Meanwhile, in the imposing tower that dominated the city's skyline, the elite watched the world below with detachment. A man of elegant posture contemplated the night lights through the armored glass, pondering recent events. He interrupted his thoughts, surprised upon noticing a report or signal that demanded his immediate attention. The observer turned sharply, intrigued by the presence or the information that had just appeared in his office. Far away, Taehyun let the tears fall freely. It wasn't just sadness, but the catalyst for a supernatural awakening. The deep anguish converted into raw power, making his pupils radiate an intense and dangerous golden glow. The response was violent. The young man crushed the skull of the first beast that dared to approach him. Before the next monster could react, a swift movement cut through the air, intercepting the attack with lethal precision. The protagonist channeled all his repressed fury into a single punch, sinking his fist into the larger creature's stomach. The force of the impact was so great that it hurled the monsters into the air, defeated by the young man's overwhelming physical strength. But the battle was not enough. Taehyun reached out towards the fallen, activating a draining ability. A vortex of blood and red energy exploded around him, consuming the vital essence of the monsters to strengthen the survivor. Kim Taehyun felt a surge of unprecedented power run through his body. The battle had awakened something far beyond simple survival. The young man analyzed the energy concentrated in his palm. This was pure mana, ready to be used to his advantage. Under normal circumstances, the continuous use of abilities would deplete any hunter's vitality to total collapse. However, he discovered a crucial exception. By absorbing the essence of the defeated monsters, mana recovery occurred at no additional cost. A confident smile appeared on his face. The protagonist realized that he had found a perfect cycle to fight indefinitely. The system confirmed his theory immediately. His rank rose to D and his abilities evolved, making him exponentially more lethal. The accumulated energy saturated the environment, a tangible proof that he was no longer the same fragile target as before. The power continued to flow, sweeping the debris around like a storm controlled only by his will. Taehyun's ambition skyrocketed. With that growth rate, he glimpsed the possibility of surpassing the highest ranks and becoming an unparalleled legend. With the massacre over, the survivor considered his next steps. Perhaps it was time to check on the situation of the group he left behind. Suddenly, his heightened senses picked up a disturbance. Something violent was happening nearby, interrupting his thoughts. A crash revealed a brutal battle. A gigantic creature smashed the scenery while attacking another human who resisted. That man, however, didn't back down. Driven by a burning desire for revenge, he counterattacked the beast with suicidal ferocity. The stranger's scream echoed through the ruins, carrying all his frustration and fury in a single, desperate blow. Kim Taehyun stopped dead, completely confused. The scene before his eyes and the fighter's identity made no sense. The colossal beast unleashed a devastating blow, focusing brute force enough to crush anything in its path. However, the attack was intercepted. The mysterious fighter blocked the impact with an energy burst, parrying the brute force with ease. The creature recoiled, stunned by the unexpected resistance. That human wasn't common prey. He retaliated with equal ferocity. The clash between the two powers released a pillar of light that tore through the skies, illuminating the city ruins like a beacon. Taehyun watched the scene paralyzed. The magnitude of that battle was far beyond his current understanding. The young man, could barely breathe before such a display of power. He realized the abyss that existed between his strength and that stranger's. The combat ended as quickly as it began. With the monster defeated at his feet, the victor stood, motionless over the carcass. The man then turned, noticing Taehyun's presence. Far from looking exhausted, he displayed a confident and almost amused smile. Ignoring the chaos around him, the stranger clasped his hands together. He seemed to prepare for a solemn ritual amidst the destruction. With a disturbing devotion, he proclaimed a silent prayer for the fallen citizens, acting like a priest of death. Taehyung continued watching, confused. The sudden shift from extreme violence to religious piety made no sense. The man's expression became manic. There was a madness seething behind that devout look that made the young man's blood run cold. Suddenly, the fanatic plunged a blade into his own body. Blood spurted, sealing some kind of distorted pact or sacrifice. He coughed up blood violently, feeling the physical impact of the wound, but showed no sign of regret. On the contrary, his smile only widened. The pain seemed to fuel his euphoria, revealing the true insane nature of that survivor. The city seemed suspended in time. It was a memory of cold days before the world turned into that hell. The inside of the store remained intact in his memory. The silence there was heavy, a harbinger of what was to come. His mother rested, exhausted. Young Taehyun just watched, feeling helpless in the face of the weariness that consumed her. She seemed at peace, but it was a fragile tranquility. He knew that moment of rest wouldn't last long. Suddenly, anguish took over. The boy realized that something was terribly wrong. The air became dense and suffocating. Panic paralyzed his senses. He couldn't look away, trapped in the horror of what his mind revisited. The protagonist stared at that younger version of himself. The powerlessness of the past reflected the situation of the present. The memory exploded into violence. Monsters emerged from the shadows. Angie sacrificed herself to protect him, blocking the fatal attack with her own body. The shock stole his voice. He tried to call out to her, but only disjointed sounds escaped his locked throat. In the present, Taehyun's gaze hardened. The old pain instantly turned into a cold and dangerous fuel. The vision returned to the deceptive calm of the store. He saw himself again watching over her sleep, wishing time would stop. The daylight touched the boy's face. He felt the weight of responsibility, unaware that fate would be so cruel. She suffered in silence. Even sleeping, the pain was there, and the son perceived every sign of her vitality fading away. The store's ceiling was the last banal thing he saw. Normality was about to be torn apart forever. Faced with an incomprehensible power and cards stacked by fate, the boy made his decision. He refused to accept that ending. The refusal was absolute. Faced with the demand, the hooded figure maintained his position, denying the request without hesitation. The full moon hung over the scene, the only silent witness to what was about to happen in the darkness. The young man, however, just smiled. Even wounded, he found a strange satisfaction and confidence in the heat of battle. He ran over the corpse of the giant beast. The battlefield became his terrain as he advanced relentlessly against the enemy. The shock of the impact was immediate. The man coughed up blood, feeling life drain from a critical wound in his chest. The assassin mocked that tenacity. To him, it was inconceivable and surprising that someone could survive a lethal attack on that vital spot. The surprise soon gave way to a sickening euphoria. That opponent was resisting far beyond what logic allowed. Han Sang-do was a true butcher. Classified as a villain, he had built his cruel reputation on piles of corpses and the suffering of others. But the hunter refused to fall. He steadied himself on the ground again, facing death head-on with a disturbing calm. The young man ignored the searing pain. His mind cleared, focusing only on the single goal of eliminating the threat before him. A latent fury awakened. Power began to overflow from within him, violently manifesting through his gaze. He launched into a final offensive. The protagonist channeled his raw energy, shaping it for the decisive attack as he leaped. The war cry broke the air. he put all his remaining strength and determination into that desperate move. The hunter summoned a luminous arsenal. Arrows of energy rained down from the skies, cornering the villain with no chance of escape or defense. Judgment descended with crushing weight. A colossal force obliterated the enemy's resistance, ending the confrontation brutally. The sudden explosion sent debris everywhere. Taehyun barely had time to shield himself against the shockwave that swept through the area. From the dust, a colossal creature revealed itself. The beast's roar made the building's foundations tremble, announcing a threat of a higher level. Chaos took over the environment. As Taehyun retreated to gain distance, the human enemies seemed to enjoy the destruction, laughing at the absurd appearance of the ogre. The beast did not hesitate to attack. With brute force, it delivered a devastating blow, capable of crushing anything in its path. The scale of the battle shifted dramatically. Taehyun found himself caught in a crossfire between a gigantic monstrosity and an unpredictable assassin. He realized that blocking would be impossible. The young man focused entirely on dodging, sliding away as the ground shattered under the monster's impact. However, the beast served as a perfect distraction. The assassin took advantage of the confusion and the smokescreen to position himself in the shadows, ready to strike. Taehyun paused for a moment, scanning the environment. His instincts told him that the real danger was not just coming from the giant creature in front of him. The human enemy prepared his blade with malice, savoring the opportunity for a surprise attack. He believed his target was vulnerable and distracted. However, Taehyun's senses were sharp. He felt the murderous intent rapidly approaching from behind and reacted at the last second. The assassin advanced with lethal speed. He aimed for a blind spot, confident that this move would end the fight immediately. With a furious cry, the man brought down the blade, putting all his weight into the blow to ensure it was fatal. But Taehyun was faster. With a mocking smile, he dodged the attack with ease, reading the opponent's movements like an open book. The response was immediate and brutal. Taking advantage of the enemy's open guard, Taehyun connected a devastating kick directly to the aggressor's face. The impact sent the assassin flying backward, sliding across the destroyed floor. Furious and bleeding, the man finally understood that he was not dealing with ordinary prey. The assassin tightened his grip on his weapon, focused entirely on the target. There was a dangerous recognition in his gaze as he faced the opponent. Amidst the destruction, the intruder confronted Taehyun, seeking to confirm if this was really who he was looking for. The tension in the air indicated that combat was inevitable. The protagonist, however, showed no fear. With a defiant smile, he provoked the enemy, calling him to fight while displaying his rocky protection. Steel collided violently against stone. The assassin's blade was blocked by the improvised gauntlet, covering the young man's arm, creating the first impact of the duel. The bold man did not hesitate, launching into a sequence of rapid attacks. He tried to overcome the brute defense with pure agility, seeking any gap in the guard. Taehyun maintained a defensive posture, crossing his arms to absorb the impact. He fully trusted in the resistance of his skill to nullify the cuts. The enemy's weapon clanged against the hard surface of the armor. Despite the force of the blows, the blade could not penetrate the boy's impenetrable defense. The confrontation evolved into a frantic exchange of blows at close range. Both fighters moved with lethal precision, parrying and counterattacking in fractions of a second. The assassin retreated, sliding across the rugged terrain while letting out a maniacal laugh. The unexpected resistance seemed to amuse him rather than frustrate him. He mocked the situation, questioning whether his sword was useless against that defense. Taehyun remained silent, ready for the next onslaught. With the colossal monster roaring in the background, the intruder expressed his genuine confusion. He could not understand how the boy possessed information about his identity. The young man ignored the question, concentrating all his strength on his right fist. For him, that moment demanded physical action, not explanatory dialogues. The enemy's gaze turned dark as he declared that the world did not follow plans. He imbued his blade with a lethal energy, raising the level of the threat. Cuts of pure energy tore through the air towards Taehyun. The attack ceased to be merely physical. transforming into deadly projectiles at a distance. The protagonist braced himself for the impending impact. He needed to test if his stone skin would be enough to withstand this new form of cutting power. The young man focused all his senses, anticipating the fatal move that would come next. The assassin unleashed a devastating wave of energy, forcing the protagonist to raise his stone defense immediately to avoid being obliterated. However, it was just a distraction. The opponent appeared in his blind spot with supernatural speed, marking the attempted block. The blade found flesh through the rock. Taehyun's blood spurted as his improvised armor gave way before the cutting impact. Without giving the boy time to process the pain, the aggressor maintained the offensive with a sequence of precise blows. The air hissed with the passage of the blade, seeking a vital opening in a deadly and incessant arc. The enemy's speed increased drastically, turning him into a blur that attacked from all directions simultaneously, surrounding his prey, while shouting that the boy's death was inevitable. The assassin intensified the rain of cuts, forcing Taehyun to close himself in a purely defensive posture. The relentless impact pushed the young man further and further back, leaving no openings for any attempt to counterattack. The cost of that desperate resistance soon became visible on the cold ground, now stained by the combatant's blood and fragments of his defense. Taehyun panted heavily, feeling the weight of exhaustion, and the burning of open wounds begin to take their toll. Despite the severe punishment he received, he remained standing, trying to catch his breath while analyzing the critical situation. His attention turned to the rocky gauntlet on his arm, realizing that the integrity of his main defense was compromised. The cruel reality of his ability became clear. The unbearable impact of the continuous blows was pulverizing the structure of the stone. And the worst part was the consequence. With each regeneration, the replacement material emerged with noticeably lower durability, making him increasingly vulnerable. The scene continues. 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 The silence of defeat hung over the ruins. In the center of the devastation, a body lay alone, the final witness to a lost battle. His strength had completely abandoned him. He collapsed, unable to continue, as hope crumbled along with the world around him. However, his mind refused to shut down. Even with his vision blurred by blood, he faced the cruel reality of his impending doom. The threat, however, was still present. A gigantic shadow blocked the little light that remained, preparing to eradicate any trace of life. Without hesitation, the beast attacked. The violence of the blow promised not only to kill, but to completely obliterate the fallen target. The ground shook violently. The force of the impact was absolute, destroying the rock and raising a dense cloud of debris. The creature growled, exhaling its primal fury. It was the sound of a predator who believed it had finished its hunt. The dust began to settle. The monster maintained its position, awaiting confirmation that its enemy had been reduced to nothing. But a scream broke the silence. Against all odds, the agony turned into a final roar of resistance. In that instant, reality warped. A new figure emerged from the shadows of death, materializing behind the wounded body like a vengeful presence. The newcomer smiled in the face of danger. An overwhelming energy emanated from him, signaling that the real battle was just beginning. The